This is the ECA SoCal Spring 24 online workshop. Thank you for joining us. If you have, as we have many people still coming in, just a quick overview. Regular meeting, you can have your camera on. Please have your sound muted. Ask questions in the Q&A tool. And if you can also share comments and look for links that we'll be putting in the chat throughout the meeting. So links that are on screen we'll also put into the chat so you can click on them. And there may be other information there. And if, you know, as we go through, if you have suggestions or for good links for materials, you're welcome to share those. Just try to keep that, of course, on topic. And don't worry if you can't turn your camera on. It's not a requirement. We just would like to see you if you can. Okay, so if you're new to us, the Earthquake Country Alliance is a public-private grassroots partnership with leaders across the state. And we have various structures to organize our leaders. We have subject matter expert committees, regional alliances. We have funding from the California Office of Emergency Services that gets support from the FEMA National Earthquake Hazards Reduction Program to support our activities. The USC statewide California Earthquake Center at formerly Southern California, now statewide, administers ECA. My name is Mark Benthian. I serve as the Executive Director for Earthquake Country Alliance. I'm also the Director for Public Education and Preparedness for SCEC. And if you aren't currently on our email list, like to join, it's free. Just go to earthquakecountry.org/join. These links you'll see are now in the chat. Now I'm going to turn over to our chairs for two of our chairs for ECA SoCal. And first, Margaret Vinci from Caltech.
Good morning, everyone, and happy June. For those of you that don't know us and are new to our quarterly meetings, I am Margaret Vinci from Caltech, Office of Earthquake Programs. And I am one of your Earthquake Country Alliance Coordinating Committee co-chairs, along with Heidi Rosofsky, who cannot join us today, and with Alan Hansen, who is retired from Simpson Strong Tie. So say hello, Alan.
Hello, everybody.
Give a little wave. So I also want to introduce our coordinating committee. These are the people that actually help us on a regular basis to provide information to you with that. And so can you go to the next slide, Mark? Great, thank you. So I want to introduce, besides Heidi and myself and Alan, we have Marilyn Jimenez from Red Cross, Mimi Teller from Red Cross, who serves our media bureau. We also have Pei Lin, who is from Orange County Emergency Management, who does our participation bureau, John Hammett and Lance Webster, who does our events bureau, Pauline Louie, who is our Shakeout events coordinator. And we also have openings right now with our committee. We also have, I want to introduce Vanessa Nava, who is new to our Earthquake Country Alliance. She is also going to be our liaison between you and your coordinating committee. And so she serves as our new liaison. Gabby is still staying with us, but she is moving on to higher things, but she still will be staying with us and working with us on a not as a regular basis, but on working with us. So I want to also invite you, everyone, to consider being a member of our coordinating committee. Meetings are via Zoom. We work together on a mutual efforts in making our community earthquake and tsunami resilient. And I want to thank everybody for participating in our quarterly workshops, our ongoing webinars, our shakeout drills, and to share information and networking together. So I'm now going to turn it over to Alan, who's going to introduce our agendas for today. Alan?
Good morning, everybody. Looks like we have a nice sized group here. So some of the things we'll be talking about today are earthquake impacts on utilities, and are the lifelines and how to reduce the danger. Craig Davis will be doing that. Potential new information tools and solving challenges with earthquake early warning. Dusty Saunders from Caltech will be doing that. Quake Break and Shake to the Beat, which there will be a little Taylor Swift reference in that. Gabrielle Tepp, also from Caltech. Mark Benthian will be doing the ECA 2024 activities and opportunities, mini awards update, material orders forms, and Quake Heroes expos. We have several of those coming up, and then open discussions. We want to get your feedback on that. So please be thinking about what you learned today, questions, networking, and that kind of thing. So thank you very much. And so it's my pleasure to introduce Craig Davis. So was getting caught up with him a little bit earlier. We've been to a lot of the same events, but I've never actually met him in person. So Craig Davis has his undergrad from Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. He has a PhD from USC in geotechnical earthquake engineering. He worked for 32 years at the LA Department of Water and Power as an earthquake expert and developed their first infrastructure resilience program. Since retiring from the LADWP in 2019, he has worked on his own to improve lifeline infrastructure systems around the world. And it just goes to show you that you can't actually retire once you get in this industry. So thanks, Craig. Go ahead and take it over.
Thank you. And you're correct. I've been told many times that a good engineer fails retirement at least twice. And I'm working on number one. So I'll be presenting on lifeline infrastructure systems. I'm going to start by giving you an overview of what lifeline infrastructure systems are, so we're all on the same page. Then I'm going to give you some examples on how they're affected by earthquakes through the 1971 and 1994 events, and then describe some societal impacts that occur when these systems are damaged, mostly through service losses, and then a short description on how we can reduce the impacts and work together to do that. So lifeline infrastructure systems in general are the subset of the built infrastructure systems that are essential to modern cities, the economy, and society to function. They include water, wastewater, stormwater, electric power, communication, gas and liquid fuels, transportation, and solid waste systems. They are large geographically distributed systems. Some cover multiple regions, states, and countries, while others are limited to the city scale. They're made of numerous interlinked specialized components that are designed and built over long time frames, at this point over 100 years or more, using a variety of different standards, procedures, and materials. They are interdependent and co-located, meaning that the performance of one affects all the others. And proximity means that failure of one can result in unintended damages and loss of services to other systems. And the systems need intimate coordination, but yet they tend to operate in silos. Next. The failures in a single system can result in cascading failures in the other systems, and public health and safety concerns like flooding, explosion, fire, electrocution, contaminated water, blocking mobility and communication, and a wide loss of services, among many other potential issues. The photo on the right shows how all of these are combined in one single location after the 1994 Northridge earthquake on Balboa Boulevard. Next. So now I'm going to go over how earthquakes affect the lifeline infrastructure systems through example, starting with the 1971 San Fernando earthquake. Next. So you can't talk about the 1971 San Fernando earthquake without actually going through the history of lifeline earthquake engineering. So this year, 2024, is the 53-year anniversary of lifeline earthquake engineering. On February 9th, 1971, the magnitude 6.6 earthquake struck in the northern San Fernando Valley. And this is the event that prompted the understanding that we need to focus more on lifelines, infrastructure systems, especially in earthquakes, but more recently across all types of hazards, include all of those associated with climate change. Mark, please push one more slide to show some photos, or one more. So the damage was widespread throughout Los Angeles in this earthquake. It affected schools, hospitals, many other types of buildings, and all of the lifeline infrastructure systems. Next slide. I'm going to go through a rapid series of slides just so you get a visual of the damage with just brief commentary. This first one is showing the surface fault rupture that affected the lifeline systems and other parts of the city. On the left is State Highway 210, and on the right is main arterial streets, subsurface lifelines, as well as you see the electric power lines and communication lines above. Next. The earthquake caused severe damage to existed in the city. These are images of the upper and lower San Fernando dams that threatened inundation to over 80, maybe even up to 120,000 people in the San Fernando Valley. Fortunately, that did not occur, but as you see on the right side, the lower San Fernando Dam lost 35 feet of freeboard, which slid 200 feet into the reservoir that you can no longer see. You just see this vertical scarp remaining and causing serious concerns to the population below. Next slide. There was a lot of other damage to water. These large diameter pipes showing large buckling and buckling of water storage tanks. Next. Electric power equipment was severely damaged throughout the city. Next, or the northern part of the city anyway. Next.
Hey, Craig, appreciate
Yeah.
how quickly you're going through. Our interpreters are just requesting just a little bit slower so they can.
Okay, I can do that.
Yeah, thank you.
Sorry about that. I wasn't prepared for that. Oil and gas pipelines were damaged by the surface fault rupture and lateral spreading, as shown in this picture. Communication systems for GTE, which no longer exists, but in other communication systems, you see the large collapse of
Wow.
their equipment. Stormwater drainage systems with surface fault rupture and lateral spreading from liquefaction. And transportation systems is showing buckling of railroad lines and collapse of highway bridges. So following the 1971 earthquake, all the infrastructure systems worked together intimately, they did, and with many other experts, and made significant improvements throughout their systems, especially in this area. Examples that I'll give you from the LA water system, because I'm most familiar with that, where they reevaluated all their dams and reservoirs and rebuilt most of those. In fact, all of the ones that needed improvements, they definitely improved. They upgraded and rebuilt most storage tanks. They improved all the pumping and chlorination stations. In addition to that, for the water, there were similar examples for other lifeline systems, and numerous code and regulation changes took place over the decades, and lifelines, as I mentioned, were recognized as essential systems for cities. Next. So now I'm going to give follow up with some examples of the Northridge earthquake. I want to point out that this is the 30-year anniversary, 2024, of the Northridge earthquake, and we, ECA, among many other organizations, are working together to provide a webinar series for Northridge 30. I'm going to briefly go through a few slides that I gave as part of one of the first webinar, and that is recorded, and I refer you to that for more detail. It is found on the ECA website. Next.
And I just put the link to that in the chat too.
So this slide is the shake map of the Northridge earthquake, showing the epicenter, and the red colors are the area of severe damage. Push one button, Mark. And the 1971 San Fernando earthquake, which also affected the northern San Fernando Valley that I mentioned before, had severe damage in the same area. So I'm showing in the white hatch the general severely damaged area for lifeline infrastructure systems, and you see that there's an overlap between the red shaded area from the Northridge earthquake and the bounded area that I identified for the San Fernando earthquake. And And I'll refer back to this in a little while, but you see that essentially we're talking about the same systems in the same general area. Next slide. So there were some of the same bridges were damaged, as well as some other ones that were not damaged in the 1971 San Fernando earthquake. You see that there was some pretty severe collapses that significantly disrupted transportation around the Southern California, and unfortunately also caused some deaths. Next. There were significant damages to the water system. I'm just showing one image of many hundred that we could show to severe problems. You see water being thrown 30 feet up into the air from a broken water main, and a map showing the locations of the most severe damages. We lost, this affected over 1 million people in Southern California, and in Los Angeles alone, there were over 750,000 people without water after the earthquake. There was some damages to sewage systems, but it did not substantially affect the ability to provide sewage services. Next. Natural gas. I showed a picture of Balboa Boulevard earlier. Here's another picture of that, as well as lines that broke and caused fires in some residential areas. So over 151,000 customers were without service. And of course, the property damage resulting from fires as a result of the gas leaks and fires that broke out from them. Next. Electric power, again, had significant damages. You see the towers that were damaged and electric power equipment in the photos below. This was the first time the city of Los Angeles ever went completely black. Didn't even happen in the 1971 earthquake, as well as outages throughout the Western United States. I think 5 or 6 states also went black because of this earthquake, as well as some areas in Canada. So going black means they had significant service outages throughout an entire zone. Next. And then some other systems, in communications, they actually performed pretty well. However, there were some notable service outages for several hours, which affects immediate emergency response. And liquid fuel pipelines performed reasonably well. However, there were some damages some oil spills, and some of those actually resulted in fire. Next. So the service recovery from the Northridge earthquake, you would have to say that overall, because of the improvements from the 1971 San Fernando earthquake, these systems did perform relatively resilient when you consider resilience as being described in terms of rapid recovery. They were able to recover their basic services to the communities that experienced the disaster in a timely manner. Of course, timely means different to different people. This was the result of the work that was done after the San Fernando earthquake that I mentioned earlier. And this is where I want to refer to, remember the map I showed you, that we're really talking about the improvements made as a result of damages from the San Fernando earthquake to the same systems and the same parts of those systems. And even considering that, with all of the effort put in, yet there was still significant damage, as I just described. Now, if we think about that, what does that mean to the areas throughout Southern California that aren't as prepared? They haven't experienced such a significant earthquake as in 1971, much less a follow-up like 1994. But what about large earthquakes in this same area or in other areas in our earthquake-prone area? We need to think about that. Next slide. So the societal impacts. The loss of lifeline infrastructure services severely affect emergency response, mostly through communications, electric power, transportation, and water for firefighting, but of course, debris management and other things related to all of the other lifeline systems are very important in the immediate aftermath. But not only that, but it affects public health and safety immediately after and for potentially long periods of time after the earthquake. It affects basic survival for life itself, as well as social and economic survival of individuals and businesses throughout the populations being affected, as well as that can spread beyond the local affected areas. And post-earthquake recovery as a whole could go on for much longer periods of time than what you would want if you're not able to rapidly recover your infrastructure services. So we need those services for all of the things I mentioned here, as well as many more that probably all of you are aware of. I'm not trying to get in too great a detail. I'm just trying to give the idea. And yet we do have these examples that show that we cannot prevent infrastructure service disruptions in extreme events. And I think the combination of the 1971 and 1994 earthquakes expressed this quite well. Next slide. So what do we do? Well, let's start by pointing out that resilience thinking really helps to reduce the impact. So resilience thinking goes beyond the idea of we need to respond in an emergency and that we need to mitigate. There's a lot of other things. So one of those is to be prepared to adapt, both in the lifeline infrastructure systems themselves, as the people who manage and operate them, as well as the customers like yourself that would be receiving these services. You need to be prepared to adapt. Because you need to understand that you don't always have those services, which is the third bullet. Be prepared to have a loss of services for some period of time. In doing that, we need to understand the interdependencies and be prepared. As an example is that if you need electric power immediately after an earthquake, maybe you need to have an emergency generator so that you can have that electric power during the time when you can't get it through the network. So not only do the communities need to be prepared to have services disrupted, but the lifeline infrastructure systems themselves need to be prepared to restore those services that are disrupted to the community. So it goes both ways. We really need to work together. And in doing that, we need to understand that not all services are needed at the same time. And an example I like to give, I write down here that hospitals and other first responders need the services before recreational facilities. So we can think about that and use that to our advantage within the lifeline infrastructure systems themselves, that we don't need to worry about everybody immediately after the earthquake because we can't prevent the service losses, but we do need to worry about some immediately after above some others. So like recreational facilities, they're definitely not on the same order as a hospital or an emergency evacuation center. In addition, we do need to consider continued thinking about how to mitigate the infrastructure vulnerabilities. We need to consider how to add redundancy to the system so we can keep providing services or more rapidly recover them. And there are many other resilience activities that can be undertaken, and I'm not intending to go through all of them here. Just want to give you this quick overview. Next slide. So now I want to go over some things that we're doing to develop methods to improve and maintain the resilience of lifeline infrastructure systems. One of those is by identifying the characteristics of resilient lifeline infrastructure systems. Once you understand what characteristics you need to possess, then you can start attaining those characteristics within the infrastructure system so that you can become more resilient. We've identified some of the main elements that make up processes for assessing, managing, and governing infrastructure systems. We've developed interactions between infrastructure system services and the communities are really important. We need to understand that better, and that is being worked on as we speak, because resilience requires broad engagements and communications among many different groups and individuals. And we've developed processes recently for identifying service recovery objectives for lifeline infrastructure systems to meet societal needs, mainly because we need consistency across all lifeline sectors to support community needs. As an example, if you need water at a certain time, you probably can't get that water unless electric power can provide the services to the water system. So there has to be consistency. If you need water in 3 days, but the water can't get electric power for 5 days, we have an inconsistency that we need to work through in our interdependencies. And we've also developed frameworks for designing and managing lifeline infrastructure to meet recovery-based objectives. Next slide. So making resilient lifeline infrastructure systems requires multiple things. First, I would focus on the community resilience. We need community resilience planning that incorporates infrastructure service needs. This is accomplished at the community level by involving the infrastructure systems. At the same time, we also need infrastructure resilience plans that incorporate user needs. This is accomplished at the infrastructure system level that involve the stakeholders, which includes all of the communities. So it goes both ways. You can't start by saying, I'm going to create a community resilience plan and assume that the infrastructure will all of a sudden become resilient. You also need to address it at the infrastructure level and work your way up to the community level so that they can engage in both directions. And then we need to design the infrastructure components and the systems to meet recovery-based objectives. And we can utilize the newly developed processes that I helped engage through FEMA and the National Institute of Standards and Technology, which goes by the acronym of NIST. Next slide. And now I'm going to show you some examples. I'm not going to go through these in great detail, just to show you that they do exist. This is a paper that was published a few years ago that defines 17 characteristics and 119 achievement indicators to be utilized to develop lifeline resilience programs. Next slide. The American Society of Civil Engineers, along with the Japan Society of Engineers, developed a international engineering framework for assessment, management, and governance, which we call the Infrastructure Resilience Framework, that identifies 8 elements necessary to understand what infrastructure resilience is. I'm not going to go through those 8 elements. I just want to point out that there's a recent published book in 2023, about 6 months ago, that goes through this process so that we could all understand infrastructure resilience and the main elements on a common basis throughout the world. Next slide. This is a diagram. Actually, it's not on my screen. It's not showing everything, unfortunately, but luckily I'm not planning to go through it. I just want to point out that we have diagrams showing how all of these 8 elements fit together. And there's a flow process to that that will allow people to understand when they're working on different aspects like service recovery, where does that fit? Or if you're looking at an assessment of an infrastructure system, where does that fit? How does that relate to the community? How does that relate to policy and engineering management and overall community governance? Next slide. And then there's this recent framework that is about to be published by FEMA for a framework to establish lifeline infrastructure system service recovery objectives for seismic resilience. I'm showing you the cover of this. It is not yet available, so if you Google it, you will not find it, but it will be out sometime this year. And it feeds into the next document. I mentioned this one earlier, so I'm not going to talk about it anymore, but next slide. Right there. So, and then NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technology, has recently published a 2-volume set describing an initial framework to design lifeline infrastructure for post-earthquake functional recovery, which really is identifying how you take the objectives that we establish, which are focused around what community needs in the prior document I showed, use that as input to identify how to design or remodel your existing lifeline infrastructure systems so that over time we can improve these systems and their resilience so that we can meet those target objectives, meaning that if a hospital needs water within 24 hours, that you would be able to design a system to do that. If you need electric power for that same hospital within 6 hours, you should be able to design your electric power system to do so. And for transportation and all the other infrastructure systems accordingly. And they should link up, as I mentioned before, and to have consistency among their service restorations. That's what these items are working. These are initial documents, and they should be utilized to make improvements not only here in Southern California, but throughout the world. Next slide. And it takes a team effort. We all need to work together to enhance our resilience. Resilience covers more than just earthquakes. For example, all of the hazards related to climate change, as well as just straight out normal operations of an infrastructure system, put significant pressures on the organizational management. And these need to be addressed along have a misspelled word there, along with earthquakes that we're talking about here. And lifeline infrastructure system services, as we all know, are critical to creating resilient communities. So we can't disregard them if we want resilient communities, which is our focus these days. It's essential to engage the infrastructure system serving your communities to encourage them to help improve their resilience, because not all are actually working in that direction, mostly because they have so many pressures on them. And everyone needs to be aware of the tools, some of which I showed you, others which I don't have time, that have recently been developed to help improve lifeline infrastructure system resilience. Next slide. So we're going to take some questions now if we have time, but I give you my email address so that you could reach out to me directly over time if you want for further information or if you have more questions.
Craig, thank you very much for the overview and your and also for all the work you've done in your career. And you can see your impact and development and the improvement of our resilience over your career and ongoing. We have a couple questions. Reminder to put your questions in the Q&A tool, preferably. I have an initial question for you, Craig. You've talked about the improvements that have been done, since Silmar and since Northridge and because of those earthquakes, and then also because of research and learning. How much are we winning the battle against the aging infrastructure? I remember from the shakeout scenario they talked about, it may have been your input on this, that many of the water mains of Southern California were over 100 years old. I assume that probably is still, they haven't all been replaced since 2008. As the infrastructure gets older, can we keep up? And what's the implications of that?
In Los Angeles, for the water, we're kind of just hanging on. I would say over the long term, we're not really keeping up, especially across the country. That may be a result of being too successful. It's been out of sight, out of mind. We've had reliable infrastructure for a long period of time during the heyday of when it was reasonably new and being improved as we went by standard expansion processes. Now many of our infrastructure systems are existing and they're not expanding, but they do need to be upgraded, and that costs money. And so that money is in competition for many other things. I'll just give you one example for water. The need to improve water quality because of other environmental issues, or even the drought situation related to climate change and the heavy rains and then the lack of rains over different years is causing problems and in conflict with how we spend our money just to improve and stay up with this aging infrastructure. So we really need to understand, and I had a line in there just implying this is an important issue, but we as customers of these infrastructure systems do need to understand that it costs money, and they need to have those funds, whether they're public or private, to be able to make these upgrades for our own purposes. And that doesn't even account for the need to make improvements for resilience. But I have plans that I propose to different people, especially through the LA water system where I worked for 32 years, on how you can do this together, right? So if you have a resilience plan and you have a plan on how to maintain and improve your aging infrastructure, you can interlink those so where it's not two separate costs, but in fact one single cost. And as you're replacing and improving your infrastructure, you should do it for the infrastructure of the future by thinking about what it takes to have a resilient infrastructure system, instead of not thinking about it and continuing to do what you've done in the past. And that's where we're making much of our big mistakes, where we can actually get a big bang for $1 by thinking about resilience as we're making these improvements. And then one last thing, it's not just the age. Age has little little to do with a lot of our infrastructure. It's other things. So deterioration is probably a better term, Mark. Aging is related to it, but some of our, just using water as an example, and this does apply to other infrastructure systems as well. Just because it's 100 years old, we have some 100-year-old pipes that look like brand new, and yet some 10-year-old pipes that are leaking because of the contaminated soils that they had to be placed in. So it's not always related to age.
We have a related
That's a great
question
question.
from Lance Webster. It seems like a lot of papers and research and such on planning, resilience planning and frameworks. What's the progress on actual implementation? And are state and federal funds available, such as the recent infrastructure initiative? Is that helpful?
I don't know if the recent infrastructure initiative actually could be used to help fund such a thing, but there are other funds like FEMA funds that can be used. My personal feeling on the progress of all of this may not reflect the reality of everybody, because of course they have limited experience with all of these infrastructure systems around the country, and especially in Southern California, I only work with a few. But I do see people paying more and more attention. Personally, I've been contacted by more agencies as time goes on. There is more interest all the time, so it would be an exponential acceleration over time. It's still a relatively few, and mostly the bigger ones that have more resources. The big question is, how do we get this into the hands of the smaller agencies, which are more numerous and basically are half of the state, for example, because they have limited resources and it's a little complicated. They have fewer employees, and so to understand how to do all of this, it takes time and money away from their normal operations. And so we're working on that aspect as well. But I am highly encouraged overall that there is strong interest. A lot of it is, how do I actually do this is the question. And resilience comes from research. And so researchers have these great ideas that I, as a practicing engineer, found that it doesn't directly apply into what is infrastructure resilience. So this idea of resilience, and I alluded to recovery, rapid recovery is not sufficient term, which is commonly used for the definition of resilience. But that's an insufficient term, in my opinion, for infrastructure resilience. Well, what is rapid? Rapid to some of you might be 100 years. Rapid to others of you are 2 seconds. And that's a huge range. So what does that really mean to somebody who's trying to implement infrastructure resilience? We really need to define that better, which is why I worked with FEMA and NIST to come up with those frameworks that I just referred to, that are recently released by NIST and soon to be released by FEMA, so that we can actually begin to understand what those are, so that we can go back to your basic question: how do we accelerate this and get this into mainstream infrastructure systems?
Thank you, Craig. Hey, Craig, there are 2 questions in the Q&A. Could you respond to those by text as we move on to our next presenter?
I will do that, and thank you, everybody.
Great. Thank you so much, Craig, for your very thorough presentation and further comments. Just to move on, reminder, if you haven't, if you aren't on our email list, you can join earthquakecountry.org/join. We do have a survey. The link will be in the chat. If you do need to leave early, please take that first. It may pop up when you end the webinar automatically. And any questions beyond what we're talking about today, always go to info@earthquakecountry.org. I'm going to come back to Margaret now with an introduction of our next speaker.
Okay, and thank you, Craig. I'm always learning something new from you. After all these years, I'm still learning new stuff. But also wanted to tell you that working together is the foundation of Earthquake Country Alliance, and helping our community and being prepared is our goal. So we will continue to work with you and learn more from you, so we can work together on making our communities more resilient. So our next speaker is Jessie Saunders, and Jessie is the Earthquake Early Warning Specialist at Caltech. She received her doctorate in Earth Sciences at Scripps Institute of Oceanography, and she is an integral part of the Shake Alert production and operations team that continually works to improve the accuracy of the Shake Alert system for earthquake early warning. With many of the felt events that we've had in the last few months, it is appropriate for us to share what is being done behind the scenes to bring you accurate information regarding earthquakes. So Jesse is going to share some of the challenges in reporting fast and accurate information and how scientists work to continually overcome the challenges. So Jesse, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Margaret, and hello, everybody. So like Margaret said, I'll be talking about Shake Alert in Southern California, just because we've had quite a few public alerts recently. So I wanted to go over basically how Shake Alert works, especially because there's been a couple of recent changes. So next slide, please. So I know a lot of people in the audience are familiar with Shake Alert and earthquake early warning, but just to get everybody on the same page, earthquake early warning aims to rapidly detect that an earthquake is occurring and then issue alerts for incoming shaking, ideally before the shaking arrives in your location. And unfortunately, while earthquake early warning is not earthquake prediction, it's able to work because the speed of information travels faster than seismic waves, particularly the S wave, which is the most damaging. And earthquake early warning alerts enable people to take protective actions like drop, cover, and hold on. And they also allow for automated protective actions such as opening fire station bay doors and slowing down trains to prevent derailments. And the Shake Alert system has been operational in California since, or at least sending public alerts in California for almost 5 years now, this October, and it is run by the U.S. Geological Survey with state and university partners, and that includes Caltech, which is where I'm from. Next slide, please. So earthquake early warning is one part of a spectrum of earthquake response products, and it's in a unique portion of that timeline. So with this timeline, before the earthquake occurs, next slide, you have long-term earthquake hazard products such as the National Seismic Hazard Map, and that can help people prepare for an earthquake before it happens. And then in the minutes to hours after an earthquake occurs, you have another suite of response products that you can see here. So these are examples of the types of products that you could see on the USGS event pages for an earthquake. So you see things like the shake map, shaking distribution maps, pager, estimated loss products, and then did you feel it, where people can respond to how they felt or what they felt during the earthquake. But earthquake early warning actually is issued while the shaking is still occurring. And so because of that, there is a trade-off between issuing alerts as quickly as possible, but to do that, we have to use as little information as possible. So there tends to be a bit of a trade-off sometimes between the amount of warning time and the alert accuracy. So I wanted to go over a bit about how we actually come up with the alerts. So this flow chart here is an extremely simplified look at how Shake Alert works. Shake Alert currently takes a source characterization-based approach to earthquake early warning, which means that once it detects an earthquake, it quickly estimates the earthquake source characteristics like magnitude and epicenter. And then it will use that information to estimate the ground motion distribution, and that then becomes the alert region information, which Shake Alert will publish, and then external Shake Alert partners will then take that information and issue alerts to people's cell phones and other users of the system. So the way that Shake Alert determines the earthquake magnitude is actually quite complicated. So Shake Alert uses 3 independent earthquake early warning algorithms for this. And so I've listed the 3 of them here. So we have, at the top, we have Epic, and then in the middle, we have Finder, and then the new one which was officially announced publicly this morning, I believe, is called GFAST. And all of these will develop their earthquake source estimates independently, and then these will get combined into a module called the solution aggregator. And that unified earthquake location and magnitude estimate will then be used to create the alert products, and that forms the Shake Alert message. So we see those three different message types here. One type is called the event product, which is just the earthquake source information. So it's magnitude and location, and then the fault rupture information, if that's available. The second product is called the contour product, which are very simplified, essentially contour polygons of set shaking intensity thresholds. And this is the product that's used for most public alerts in Shake Alert. And then finally, we have the grid product, which is an estimate of the shaking intensity on a approximately 20-kilometer grid. And that product is more or less a very simplified version of Shake Map, is one way you can think about it. So in the next slides, I wanted to talk about how the individual algorithms work. And so I will start with EPIC. So EPIC stands for Earthquake Point Source Integration Code. It is the early warning algorithm that's primarily operated and developed by UC Berkeley. So EPIC is the P-wave based algorithm. So it will make its earthquake detections and its magnitude estimates using the P-wave information, and it's quite sensitive. So the middle plot here is a section of seismic waveforms for a recent earthquake, and all of the vertical lines that you can see show the P-wave detections from EPIC. And so once EPIC detects the P-waves for an earthquake, it will use up to 4 seconds of the P-wave data to estimate the magnitude. And so it will use a scaling relationship based on the peak P-wave displacement. And so because of this, EPIC is typically the fastest algorithm that works in Shake Alert. It's usually the first to detect the earthquake and issue its magnitude estimate. And it's very good for smaller to moderate magnitude events. But once you get above magnitude 6 or 6.5, then it starts to not do as well with estimating the magnitude. So then we turn to our next algorithm, and that's called FINDER. FINDER stands for Finite Fault Rupture Detector. FINDER is operated and developed at Caltech, so I work on this algorithm. So FINDER will use the distribution of peak ground acceleration observations at stations, and it will compare that distribution with a set of pre-computed ground motion distribution templates. And based on the best matching template, that will determine both the magnitude estimate for that earthquake, but also an estimated fault rupture information. And so in the figure that you can see here, the different subplots in this figure march through time during a simulated real-time playback of the magnitude 7 Kumamoto earthquake in Japan. So you can see in subplot A, the earthquake has just started, so only a few stations light up. But as the earthquake propagates and shaking moves elsewhere, you can see how the black line showing the FINDER fault rupture estimate, how that grows in time and how everything matches the observed shaking. So because of that, FINDER tends to be very good for larger magnitude earthquakes, magnitude 6 and higher, although it is calibrated to be able to work for smaller magnitude earthquakes. Next slide, please. So our final early warning algorithm that we use for estimating magnitude is called GFAST. GFAST stands for Geodetic First Approximation of Size and Time. And GFAST is very interesting compared to the other algorithms because while EPIC and FINDER use traditional seismic data, GFAST will use GNSS data or GPS displacement data. And this is really useful for the largest earthquakes, for example, the large subduction zone earthquakes that we might be able to see offshore the Pacific Northwest. And that's because for larger magnitude earthquakes, the displacement information is very important. So in this figure that I'm showing here, these show example GPS displacement waveforms for earthquakes of different magnitudes, where at the bottom, we have the magnitude 6 South Napa earthquake, and as we go further up on the plot, we increase our magnitude. And the black line shows the observed GPS displacement waveform, and then the colored lines show high pass filtered or higher frequency content. And so the colored lines basically simulate what we would be able to see with the seismic data, but the black lines show what we see in the GPS data. So as you can see, having information from the GPS can be really helpful for the really large earthquakes. So next slide, please. Thank you. So yeah, so like I said, Shake Alert combines the magnitude estimates from all three of these algorithms in order to perform or to get a unified source estimate for its alerts. And so the plot that I'm showing here is an example of how Shake Alert combines the different algorithms. So this is the magnitude estimate as a function of time relative to the start of the earthquake. And this is a simulated playback of the magnitude 7.1 Ridgecrest earthquake. And the different colors are the different algorithms, where the black line shows the combined magnitude estimate from each of these. So you can see in the beginning of this earthquake, the EPIC algorithm in red is the first one to detect and issue its estimate, but then it stops. It reaches a magnitude estimate of about 6.4 is its maximum. But then a little bit later, once Finder detects the earthquake, you can see how it increases its magnitude estimate in time. And so the black solution aggregator estimate starts to follow that. And then finally, we have our GFAST magnitude estimates in blue, which start a little bit later. And you can see how that corroborates the Finder estimates later on. Okay, so that's basically how all of the Shake Alert algorithms work. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the performance of Shake Alert in Southern California for the last quarter since the beginning of March. So unfortunately, this is a little bit out of date as of last night, but until yesterday, there were 8 earthquakes that had Shake Alert magnitude estimates exceeding magnitude 4.5, and that is the threshold that is used for sending public alerts to cell phones. And so I've listed the individual earthquakes that exceeded that here, and the ones that are in bold, these are earthquakes that had Shake Alert magnitude estimates exceeding magnitude 5. So alerts were also issued through the wireless emergency alert system for that. And then the earthquake that is on the bottom of this table, this was an earthquake that was pretty far south of the border. And so even though Shake Alert had a magnitude estimate that exceeded the public alert threshold, the actual alert regions for this earthquake did not overlap in California. So no public alerts were actually issued to people in California for that earthquake. So not only does Shake Alert publish information for earthquakes that have public alerts associated with it, but it'll also detect smaller earthquakes just to make sure that the system is working. So in this time, there were 13 earthquakes that had Shake Alert magnitude estimates exceeding magnitude 4. So this is a threshold at which you would see Shake Alert summary information appear on the USGS earthquake event web pages. And then in terms of the Shake Alert internal alert servers, it'll send information if it thinks the earthquake is magnitude above 3.5. And Shake Alert successfully detected all 27 of those magnitude 3.5 earthquakes that happened in Southern California at this time. And 24 of them had actual magnitude estimates from Shake Alert exceeding that threshold to be published on the servers. And then there were an additional 8 magnitude 3 to 3.5 earthquakes that had magnitude estimates that exceeded that magnitude 3.5 threshold. And then as of last night, there were a couple of other earthquakes that had shake alert magnitude estimates exceeding that magnitude 4.5 threshold. Both of them were in this Delta Baja California area, where you can see there's been a lot of earthquakes there, and I'm sure Gabriel will talk more about that in the next talk. One of those earthquakes, actually both earthquakes did have magnitude estimates from shake alert exceeding that magnitude 5 WIA threshold, but only one of them had alert regions overlapping in California. So only one of these earthquakes had public alerts associated with that. So if we go to the next slide, I'd like to highlight one of these earthquakes that occurred. This was the magnitude 4.9 earthquake that happened in mid-May. And so the map that I'm showing here, the background colors are the shake map distribution for this earthquake, where the pink star is the epicenter from the catalog value. And then the black star is the epicenter estimate from shake alert, where the octagons that you see show the maximum alert extent for the shake alert contour product. So the largest contour that you can see in kind of the light gray blue color, that is the maximum extent of the MMI3 alert contour. So that would be the contour used for public alerts through cell phone apps like MyShake, and then the Google Be Aware alert. And then the next contour in the light blue, that is the MMI4 alert region. And so that specifically is the alert region that we use for the wireless emergency alerts. So as you can see for this earthquake, the wireless emergency alerts did include the area of El Centro, for example. And for this earthquake in particular, we did have a magnitude overestimate for this earthquake by Shake Alert. So Shake Alert estimated this earthquake at a magnitude 5.6, and that is in part because of a poor location estimate. So offshore and edge of network earthquakes can be challenging for the Shake Alert algorithms, and that's due to poor station coverage. So all of the triangles that you see in this map are the stations that are used by Shake Alert. So in this area, we tend to have sparser station coverage. And then some of these stations can have late data delivery occasionally. And so because of that, Shake Alert ended up pushing its source estimate a little bit farther south. And because that source estimate was farther away, that increased the magnitude estimate by Shake Alert. However, despite this magnitude estimate, we can see that the MMI4 alert region used for WIA alerts still encompasses the area that experienced likely felt shaking. So most people that were issued an alert through WIA likely still felt the earthquake. Another thing I would like to note about that earthquake is that most of the behavior that you're seeing here is from the EPIC algorithm. Once again, that's because EPIC tends to have the best behavior oftentimes for smaller magnitude earthquakes. So in that combination, Shake Alert tends to favor EPIC. However, Finder did perform really well for this event. So one thing that we're looking into is that instead of combining the individual early warning algorithms in terms of their magnitude and location estimates, it might be a better idea to combine the algorithms in terms of their individual predicted ground motions. So that could be one way that we could produce more accurate alerts. So next, please. So in summary, Shake Alert produces alerts by combining earthquake source estimates from different early warning algorithms that have varying strengths and weaknesses, and this makes the system more robust. And so that's once again shown here in this slightly more complicated flowchart. And while Shake Alert is successfully producing alerts for significant earthquakes, some challenges do remain. These include the out-of-network earthquakes like I just showed you, and then there's also complex sequences like earthquake swarms. And that can be challenging for these Shake Alert algorithms because when you have multiple earthquakes occurring approximately simultaneously, that can confuse the system because they're trying to estimate the individual earthquake magnitude and locations. So we're always looking for ways to try to improve the current system, and that's something that the Shake Alert project is doing as a whole. And I just wanted to highlight in orange on this flow chart the specific areas of Shake Alert that Caltech and the Southern California Seismic Network has been working on in that effort. So in my last slide, I just wanted to highlight basically how you can sign up to get Shake Alert earthquake early warning alerts. There's a bunch of different combinations of both magnitude thresholds and shaking intensity thresholds at which different alerts will be issued. If you personally don't have Shake Alert on your phone, there's different ways you can sign up for that. If you have a phone that is an Android operating system, Shake Alert should be built in to that system. But if you don't have an Android phone, there are several cell phone apps that you can look into, and I've listed 2 of them here. So these are my Shake and Alert San Diego. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Jesse. And I'll point out that Margaret Vinci from Caltech has been answering some questions and adding some details in the chat. So if you're not following along in the chat, definitely look there too. Vanessa, do you want to ask the question in the Q&A?
Yeah, Jesse, thank you for that presentation. So some of the data that you presented shows some of the activity in Baja California. So the question, I think it's kind of related to this. How far south in California have EWs been located?
Yeah, that's a good question. So actually, if we go back, if we have the time to go back to that map, in the previous slide, there we go. Thank you. So the actual reporting region for the Southern California Seismic Network and also for Shake Alert is south of the California border, and it just intersects with the Gulf of California. So it's more or less the southern extent of the map that you see here. So we try to be able to detect earthquakes that happen in this location, but in terms of actually issuing alerts for earthquakes in this area, Shake Alert only issues alerts if the actual shaking intensities for the alert thresholds cross over into California.
Excellent.
Yeah, so we had a couple of earthquakes recently where the alert regions were too far south for us to issue alerts, which is also good because likely there wasn't felt shaking in California for those earthquakes.
Okay, thank you. And then we have one more question. How many strong motion sensors are directly linked to the early warning system?
Oh, that's a great question.
It's 420.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, so there's about 400 in Southern California. I believe the number throughout the West Coast, so California, Oregon, and Washington is about 1,200.
And like Art mentioned, I think Margaret already covered a lot of the questions that you kind of covered in one of your last slides. But if anybody else doesn't have any other questions in the chat, I think that's it.
Okay, so thank you, Jesse. This was a great overview. And I will mention that Jesse actually is responsible for building some of those algorithms that she explained this morning. So moving on, the Southern California Seismic Network is a collaborative effort between Caltech, USGS, Cal OES, so the State of California Earthquake Center, and the California Geological Survey. And so we all work together to then create this data from the sensors that are buried in the ground in Southern California. And then in Northern California, there is the Northern California Seismic Network run by UC Berkeley, USGS, the same partners up in Northern California. Together, we are called the California Integrated Seismic Network. And so for California, we monitor all earthquakes from the Mexico border to Paso Robles, and then Berkeley picks up Paso Robles to the Oregon border. So our next speaker is going to be Gabrielle Tepp. She is our staff seismologist at Caltech, whose main responsibility is to monitor all of these earthquake activity in Southern California from the Mexican border to Paso Robles and enter the data into a database so that everyone has this information to use quickly. As soon as that earthquake has happened, to be able to go and capture this information and to know what's happening so you can make good educated decisions as to what your next response is going to be after you have done draw, cover, and hold on. So Gabrielle?
Okay, thank you, Margaret. Oh, we can go back to the first slide for a second. Okay, so I'm just going to give an overview of the seismicity in Southern California for the past quarter. So this would be March through May. This map right here is just all of the networks operated by the Southern California Seismic Network. I think as you saw on Jesse's plots earlier, we also get data from some other networks like in Baja California. So this is the stations we run, but not all of them that we use. And then this red pentagon is our reporting region. So as Margaret said, we're responsible for reporting on all earthquakes within that red pentagon. Okay. Thank you. Okay, so this quarter we had just shy of 4,000 earthquakes that we located and 135 quarry blasts. And out of those, 396 were above magnitude 2, 56 were above a magnitude 3, and 8 were above a magnitude 4. So this is a little less than the first quarter of this year, but still quite a lot. And as you can kind of see from the list here, most of those magnitude 4s were part of this swarm in Baja, just south of the border in mid-May. So the map on the left is just showing you the distribution of the seismicity. So the darker colors are higher magnitudes. So you can kind of see where those big ones happened. And yeah, so we get the normal. So we see the ones along the San Andreas Fault, and then the Elsinore Fault and San Jacinto. And then also up in the Ridge Crest area, we still see, we're still getting some aftershocks from the Ridge Crest event almost 5 years ago now. But yeah, it's greatly reduced compared to, the years afterwards. So our average earthquake rate is about 45 per day, and our highest rate was on 209 on May 18th. So you can see that on this plot in the lower right. The orange line is just how many earthquakes there were in any given day over this quarter. And then the blue dots are the magnitude 3 and above earthquakes. So you can kind of see we had a slow start to the quarter, which was a nice break after a busy first quarter of the year. And then it's picked up recently, and we've had several swarms over the past few weeks. Okay, so next slide. Okay, so I was just going to highlight a few things here. So the one I was going to highlight is the magnitude 4.1 corona sequence. So this was right at the beginning of May in the afternoon. Some of you may have felt that one. It was down here. And yeah, this was the shake alert region for it. This one was really interesting. It had 13 foreshocks in that area in the few days before the main shock. And it didn't have a lot of aftershock activity right away. There were about 50 by the end of May in that region, as you can see on the map. But it was kind of interesting that we had a bunch of foreshocks and then not very many aftershocks. The largest foreshock was a magnitude 2.8 the day before, and then the largest aftershock was magnitude 2.5. And yeah, it was pretty widely felt. So it looks like we had about 8,300, almost 8,400 felt reports mostly from the greater LA area. Okay, next slide. Okay, so this is the Baja swarm that Jesse mentioned earlier on May 12th. So we had 70 located events. And as she also mentioned, because this is kind of at the edge of our network where we don't have a lot of stations, the minimum magnitude that we can report for this region is higher than it is for other parts of our network. So that's partly why I say we have 70 located events, but there may have been more in the swarm that we just simply could not locate because they were too small and we didn't have enough recordings. 16 of these events were magnitude 3 or above. I have the 3.5s listed here. You can see there were 4 that were above a magnitude 4. And this was the Did You Feel It map for the largest 4.9, and also the shake alert that, again, you saw earlier. Okay, then I had one more. So one more sequence. This was the Brawley swarm the following weekend. So this was May 18th to May 20th. And this swarm had 270 earthquakes that we located. 13 were a magnitude 3 or above, but we didn't have any 4s. So the largest one here was a 3.9. And this was the Did You Feel It map for that. So yeah, lots of swarm activity in the Imperial Valley and Baja California over the past few weeks. We also just saw a revival of that Baja swarm, or something very closely located to it, last night. So yeah, so that's all I have for my quarterly earthquake report. I don't know if you want to do questions on this right now or move on.
Did I miss it? Did you mention the event that happened on Sunday morning and the aftershock yesterday?
Yeah, so I didn't mention it partly because it was out of this quarter, but yeah, so there was a magnitude 3.4 earthquake north of LA. So it was kind of between LA, Alhambra, and South Pasadena. So I think the area was like El Sereno. So that was, I felt that one, got a pretty nice jolt out of that one. And then yes, there was another magnitude 3 yesterday afternoon in the same area. But yeah, I don't really have too much else to say about that one.
Alan, you put a question in the Q&A. It's maybe it's Corey blasts was the question, and I'm not sure if that was a question about how those get recorded or if any were recorded.
Yeah, I had that on the first slide. I think we had 135, if I remember, this quarter. So that's, 40 a month, a little over 40 to 50 a month. So yeah, these are mostly just like mining blasts from around the state that we locate. They're usually around magnitude 1 to 2, but that's based on the way that we measure them, at least. But yeah, we do record them, a few times a week at least.
I had never heard that term before. I was just curious. Thank you.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they're mostly mining blasts at, the quarries around the state. So.
And then there's another question we'll ask right now. You could ask or answer, or Jesse, if she's still with us, or Margaret, from Mike. Earthquakes are published using threshold value magnitude 4.0 threshold. How soon are they published after the event?
So, so that's for earthquake early warning is magnitude 4. For our routine monitoring operations, we have a automatic real-time earthquake detection system, and that takes about 2 minutes to locate an earthquake and post it. And then it takes more time for the analyst to go look at it and make sure it looks good and to finalize it and make sure it's as accurate as we can get it. So as Jesse was saying, for early warning, you have a trade-off between accuracy and speed. Whereas for routine monitoring, we go a little bit slower, but we focus a lot more on the accuracy. So yeah, so the initial location will come out within about 2 to 3 minutes, and then updates will come as soon as we're able to do so.
And then an often asked question, thank you, Joe, it's because it's important to people understand. Does a swarm predict a strong quake or stress relief to avoid a bigger shake?
That is a good question, and I don't know if I have a great answer. So there's a lot of things that may cause a swarm. So a lot of the time they're often thought to be associated with fluid movement. So this could be like water underground, or at volcanoes, it could be magma. You see this sort of thing with like fluid injection wells. And yeah, so it's kind of hard to say. It's going to depend a lot on the specific setting and the specific details of where you're looking. But yeah, the kind of the definition of a swarm is that you have a bunch of similarly sized earthquakes with no clear main shock. So that's how we distinguish a swarm from a sequence most of the time. But yeah, it's a complicated question that a lot of people are interested in learning more about and understanding more about. Because yeah, it definitely helps with understanding, I don't know if I want to say earthquake prediction, but understanding, you know, where we might expect something to happen or not.
Is there any monitoring or checking or kind of correlating between the uptick in solar activity and the uptick in earthquake activity?
I do not know of any. There may be some research out there, but I do not know anything specific about that.
And one last question, kind of related to the mining. I don't know if it's any different, but and if you would, or anybody would know the answer to the specific one from Rachel, could lithium mining trigger an earthquake fault? Trigger an earthquake?
I'm not sure. So the mining, I think, is usually pretty shallow, like it's pretty near the surface, whereas our faults are usually much deeper underground. So I would say it doesn't seem super likely to me, but stress, really we were talking about stress changes, right? So if you have a big enough stress change on a nearby fault that's, you know, already critical and ready to rupture, just a small stress change might be enough to trigger it. But again, that's kind of hard to say, and it would probably depend on the specific situation. Though generally speaking, quarry blasts are a lot shallower, and like I said, they're fairly small, so I don't know that that would be a big concern. But
Thank you. Okay, let's go ahead and have you move on to this very interesting slide and presentation.
Okay, so this is a fun one that Margaret asked me to do. So the Southern California Seismic Network, well, okay, so many of you, I guess I'll just start with this if we go to the next slide. So last summer 2023, you may have seen swift quakes going viral. They were kind of all over the internet and social media. There was a Taylor Swift concert in Seattle, and a seismologist up there looked at seismic activity caused by those concerts. And that got us thinking and motivated us. And the Southern California Seismic Network, a few of us got together with some colleagues at UCLA, and we put together our own little investigation when Taylor Swift was in LA. So if you go to the next slide. Yeah, so we did an investigation in LA. So one of the engineering professors here at Caltech, she helps run the community seismic network. And so she wanted to put some of the community seismic network accelerometers into the SoFi Stadium. So we had 10 of them in there, which is this bottom part of the figure. They're the red triangles. And then we also had our network stations up here in blue, and this one labeled zy.cite. That was one that we deployed across the street from the stadium specifically for those concerts. And so that was just an accelerometer, like a strong motion sensor. We later found out that the California Geological Survey has a seismic station in the parking lot of SoFi Stadium, but unfortunately they no longer had the data for the concert, or for this particular Taylor Swift concerts, but they did have some for other concerts. So we found some interesting signals. So this is what the concert data looked like. Just a few of the seismic stations from the closest at the top to the farthest away, which was about 9.5 kilometers, so about 6 miles. We even saw a few signals at LAX, which was kind of surprising given how noisy it is there. So yeah, these are mostly low frequency signals, and you can see there are these interesting little dashed lines that are spaced apart. And so these are actually harmonic. So harmonic is just, you know, a very narrow frequency that's equally spaced. So thinking about like a guitar string and the overtones you might have from that. And then this B is just showing, so this is the whole concert on the left, and then on the right is just showing the wiggles, the waveforms from one song as an example. Yeah, so we recorded signals from 43 out of the 45 songs that she played. And the frequencies of those signals are related to the beat of, or the beat rate of each song. So you can actually match them up and figure out which signals belong to which song based on the frequencies and also the time that each one started. You can look at the set list and figure out the order. Okay, so continuing on. So one thing we wanted to know is how strong are these signals? So one way you can do that is traditional magnitudes like the local or Richter magnitude, and that's based on amplitude. But the thing with that is that it assumes that your energy is in one short burst, you know, because earthquakes are really sharp and short most of the time. So the local magnitude works really well for that, or an amplitude-based magnitude. But in this case, as you saw before, we have a very extended signal and there isn't really one peak to it. So we wanted to use something called energy magnitude, which just is using, you figure out the energy released during the song, and then you can convert that into a magnitude or an equivalent magnitude. And you can look at it per song or per unit time. So this first plot right here is just showing all the different songs and the energy released. So blue is for the entire song and red is per minute. And then the bottom plot is just showing the comparison of these different magnitude types. So the red squares are the energy-based magnitude, and the blue dots are amplitude-based magnitude at two different stations. Sorry. The dark blue is the one across the street, and then the light blue is one of our permanent stations. So you can see there's a really big difference here, and that's basically what we would expect because, you know, the energy, like I said, takes into account the whole thing, like all of the energy, whereas the amplitude is just going to take the highest peak. So you can think of it like a firework bang versus like a jet engine roar. Like even if they have the same energy, one is squished into a short impulse, and then the other one is spread out over, you know, a few minutes. So yeah, the strongest song we saw was a 0.85 with the energy magnitude, and that was Shake It Off for the Taylor Swift fans out there, the Swifties. And then our local magnitudes were down here more like a -2, so much smaller.
Gabrielle, could you explain what it means to have a negative magnitude?
Yeah, so the magnitude is a log scale. So basically you're trying to think of the best way to put this. So you're looking at a power of 10 is basically what that is. So you would have, you know, a 0 would be 1, a 1 would be 10, a -1 would be 0.1. If you were to take it out of the log. So we put it on a log scale just to kind of condense it and make it more easily comparable. Otherwise, you know, our magnitudes, it would be a lot harder to report on things. So for each magnitude unit, you go up 10 times in amplitude, and you actually go up 30 times or 32 times in energy for each increase in magnitude unit. So a magnitude 0 is 32 times more energetic than a magnitude -1.
Yeah. And I think it was all based on how Richter defined the magnitude 1 back in the 30s as being a certain amount of energy, and then it was 10 times less or 10 times more each time. Yeah, thank you. Because we don't hear about -2 earthquakes that often because they would be only felt on an instrument, right?
Yeah. We do locate them. We do locate a few dozen earthquakes below magnitude 0 every year. So, okay, so then if you're wondering what was happening inside the stadium with those sensors, so here's, I guess I should have explained the spectrogram earlier. You have time on the X and frequency on the Y, and the colors are how strong. So the yellows means there's a lot of energy at that frequency, and blue means there's very little. So you can see this one, it looks very similar to what we saw outside the stadium. And then this is what the waveforms look like. So you can see on the level 8, it was much stronger shaking than on level 1, which again isn't super surprising. The maximum amplitude of shaking was about 1% G, which is equivalent to maybe an MMI 2 or 3 type of shaking. So you could certainly feel it, but it's not, you know, super strong. It's not going to knock you over or anything. But that's inside the stadium. So yeah, one of the other things they wanted to do with this inside with the sensors inside the stadium was to look into doing this, you know, getting data back from their sensors in real time and whether it could be used for like monitoring structural health. So, you know, if the vibrations change before and after an earthquake, that might say this building has something structurally wrong with it and it's not safe to use or to occupy or to use to like house like evacuees or whatever. So that was one of the motivations for this part of the project. Yeah. You can move to the. Okay, so what creates these signals? This is the main thing that's been up for debate. So on one hand, people say it's the crowd, like, you know, jumping around, making noise. And then on the other hand, there's the argument for no, it has to be like the speakers or the instruments or the music, because it's very tied to the beat rate. And so, yeah, so we wanted to, a lot of signs were pointing towards it being the crowd, but I was double guessing myself. And so I kind of asked, like, are we really sure it's not the music? And I kind of said, well, you know, if it is the music, can we recover those same signals from the audio files? And the answer to that was no, that failed. So then I had another thought was maybe it's something specific to the seismic recording or to having a speaker. And the response there was, let's do an experiment. So we did. We put out a couple strong motion sensors next to our portable PA system that our department has. And we blasted some Taylor Swift in the basement of our building on a Sunday morning so that we didn't annoy all of the occupants in the office. Okay, so we go to the next slide. So we tested, like I said, we tested a Taylor Swift song. I also brought a bass guitar and we just tried a very simple beat. So like one note just repeated at the same time to see if we could like isolate one component of a song. And then kind of as a spur of the moment, you know, Taylor Swift is very catchy. So it got to the last chorus of the song and I looked at my colleague and I was like, let's jump. And he didn't join me, he just videotaped me, but you know. It turned out that actually was a very good spur of the moment decision, because if you see here, we have waveforms at the top and then these spectrograms again, and I have labeled here music, jumping, and then bass beats. And you can see the jumping was the only thing that created this low frequency harmonic signal. So this is in C. The panel C is the zoom in version of that. And you see how nicely spaced and repetitive the bass beats were in this part B. It was actually better than my jumping, but still only the jumping created the harmonic signal, which was really interesting. But you know, pretty good evidence that it is actually the crowd that creates that signal. And we have a few other lines of evidence that back that up as well. And that's what they saw in Seattle. They also did a study, though, a little bit different. So that's, yeah, was our our study on the Taylor Swift concerts in a nutshell. There's a lot more details in our paper if you're interested, but yeah.
Gabrielle, we have a request in the chat to see your video of you jumping. I'm just kidding. There's not
internal use only.
Well, we all want to see it. That's not a question in the Q&A or the chat, so we won't see it. Thanks for putting the QR code here. So I'll leave this here for a moment. If anybody wants to use your phone to in a camera app to get that link.
Yeah, so that one goes directly to the paper, which will probably be paywalled for most people, but there is an open access version through ESOR. So yeah, if you just if you like go to that website and search for the same title, they're basically the same. It just isn't the final version.
And if you need to look for that, you can also email us. We'll connect you with Gabrielle, info@earthquakecountry.org. Reminder about the survey. One final question just before I do my talk. Would anybody be from Mike Schoblan, would anybody be able to tap into the real-time detection of earthquakes that you use for the early warning system? I'm not, maybe that's for interest, or Mike, if you want to come off or turn your microphone on and clarify what type of tapping into are you interested in there? That's Gabrielle, you have it.
Hi, this is Mike.
Sure.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. So we're developing a system where we identify the structural integrity with our sensors, and what we want to do is to fail safe the system by tapping into the USGS databases using the APIs, and right after an incident, we'd like to have that verification from USGS as soon as we possibly can. And when I see real time, I'm interested to know, can we, as an outside private entity, tap into that data and get those notifications directly into our backend?
Thanks for that clarification. I turn to Jesse or Margaret, perhaps, in terms of answering that question regarding the maybe it's a LTO option or something like that.
Well, I'm unclear as to whether this is the early warning or whether this is just the regular monitoring of earthquakes, and all the data is actually sent on an RSS feed that you can tap into. I believe that is located on the USGS website. And you can tap into an RSS feed and have it sent to you. But that would be the actual monitoring of the earthquake with the actual information, not the estimate that comes off the early warning. And so that I do not believe you can tap into, because that is an estimate of what's happening because the earthquake is still happening. And so it's being updated every millisecond as that earthquake continues to rupture. But if it's the after information you want, you can get that off an RSS feed.
Right.
And so
Okay.
if you want to contact me at vinci@caltech.edu, then maybe we can help you get what you need to have.
That's great. You know what? Can you send your email in the Q&A or chat function so I can?
Yeah, I'll put it into chat.
Okay, thanks. Thank you.
Great, interesting question. All right. As a reminder, after my presentation, Alan, I'll just go for it here with the time. We will ask if you have any thing you'd like to share, any activities or new materials or anything like that. So I'm going to quickly go through my presentation here, just some updates on ECA opportunities and activities, and then turn it over to all of you. For those of you who are new to ECA, we coordinate a lot of messaging and resources for use in California and beyond. We support the Tsunami Preparedness Week and the Shakeout, and you can find a lot of activities both coming up and past at earthquakecountry.org/calendar. An email was sent this morning to the ECA statewide email list. If you did not get that, follow up with an email to info@earthquakecountry.org. We'll make sure to check that you're on the list. If you think you are, you can always go to earthquakecountry.org/join to join us if you're not. But that email had, I think, maybe 10 different upcoming webinars, workshops, and trainings, and a summit, many of which are next week. So look for that email or look on the calendar for many of those. We'll be adding a few more to the calendar as well. So reminder, we do have outreach committees for different sectors, and we encourage, if you're a member or interested in one of these sectors, to join us. Go to earthquakecountry.org/committees. And again, you can also email us at info@earthquakecountry.org. If you're looking for a speaker or a booth, an information table booth, as shown here with Alan, and that's your wife, right, Alan? You're at an event in San Diego County. You can go to earthquakecountry.org/ECA-events to request fill out a form to let us know what you're looking for. We have a mini award program, and we're about to launch this for 2024. It's going to be a new process where you'll be able to pick and we used to have these kind of packages as you see here, but it wasn't necessarily ideal for every situation. So now you'll be able to basically order up to $500, in some cases up to $1,000 if you've have had a package before and showed you were successful in implementing it. And you'll be able to choose the items that you get, including for educational materials. So look for an email again if you're on the email list coming soon. Our messaging about what to do before, during, and after, of course, is the 7 steps to earthquake safety with detailed web pages in both English and Spanish, as shown at the bottom of this, and also being put into the chat. Links to that. And we have materials that connect to those 7 steps and many of the topics within them in 16 languages at earthquakecountry.org/languages. And while we have a lot of these as PDFs that you can download, we're very pleased that because of support from Cal OES and the funding they get from FEMA each year, the NEHR program, we're going to be able to print and ship materials on request, especially to local governments, nonprofits, and others on approval. So, or community groups, so large businesses or such, it's not really what that's meant for, but if you're getting them, if you're with a business and you're getting them for your outreach to your community, then let us know. This ordering form also will be available soon, and you'll be able to request for many of those printed materials in multiple languages and get them. There will be a limit on how much you can get. We're not going to give you, 10,000 copies of a document. It'll be a lot less than that, at least per order. And we are going to have a way that if you're interested in getting them, and you would like a larger quantity, that we can work with you on either buying from us or getting. Of course, you can always download the file and print them on your own. Now, also, we have the Northridge 30th anniversary campaign this year. We're kind of a number of components, including a webinar series that we've mentioned earlier during Craig's talk at earthquakecountry.org/Northridge. You can learn about those. We have some new ones coming up also that are on the ECA calendar. So we're doing that in partnership with a number of engineering organizations. And then Quake Heroes is a film that we've created that we're a 55-minute documentary of stories of people from the Northridge earthquake. We're very proud of this. People who see it think it's a really great overview of what can happen, what can be done, and what can be done to reduce the consequences in the future, with a lot of partners and support, combining both interviews and reenactments, news footage. And what we're having is what we call Quake Heroes Expos, in a large scale event where we have people see the film and then go to a fair with booths for each of the 7 steps to earthquake safety, with partner organizations hosting them. It's been working really well, though we also can, of course, have a smaller scale event to a smaller number of people. And you can learn more and schedule a discussion about options at quakeheroes.org. This is just some of the events we have scheduled. Many more are actually in the works. And so we're looking forward to bringing the film to communities. And if you're, again, interested in having an event like this for your community, we are getting some funding from Cal OES that may allow us to bring everything and manage it and bring it to you. So if you're not sure you can organize such a thing, we may be able to organize it for you or with you, and that could determine the level of cost. And of course, Shakeout's coming up, and we're about to launch registration. You'll be getting emails if you have registered in the past to renew your registration for 2024. Though you don't have to wait, you can go in and log in, or if you've never registered for Shakeout, hopefully that's not many of you, but you can go in and you can register today. And this year is Shakeout Day, always on the third Thursday of October, is on October 17th. You can have your drill at 10:17 a.m. as many people kind of coordinate the date with the time. And that is the time when there, as far as I understand, there will be this year again a test of the MyShake earthquake early warning app. And so if you coordinate your drill and have your people participating have the MyShake app on their phones, they will get a test alert at drill time. I know some of you have your drills on different dates, and so we can't schedule it to go to everyone on your date, but we are going to be coming out with guidance on how you can kind of fold in the potential for people in a real earthquake getting the earthquake early warning, so you can include that as part of what you're practicing for in your drills. A lot of information and guides and such at shakeout.org/how to participate. All right, so that was a quick run through, and no questions came in. Do be looking for the emails on our mini award and new order material ordering form. And I'm looking at the chat. Just you can see that there are links there as well. Reminder that and that's how to join us to get on the email list and notifying for these upcoming opportunities. And with that, I will turn back to our chairs, Margaret and Alan, for this last part of our meeting.
Hello, Mark. Well, that was exciting. I mean, there's always something coming up with the ECA, especially with the Quake Heroes presentations. So that's a great way to get the word out. So this is your portion of the webinar. So we have 98 people online. Would love to have 98 ideas or what you learned or whatever, but whatever anybody wants to share with us, either what you're doing in your area, your organization, or any questions you might have, or jokes, whatever you want to throw out there, that'd be great.
What you learned today, something new that you didn't know before.
And don't everybody reply at once.
In the interest of nobody stepping up right away, I will correct something that I said earlier. So you can get the RSS feed off of the earthquake information, but if you do want access to the earthquake early warning feed, you can do that by becoming a technical partner, and you get a licensed agreement with the USGS to have access to that data coming off for the earthquake early warning, and with a proven concept for delivery of that alert. And so you get a license agreement. So you can get that information by becoming a technical partner. And anybody interested in doing that, again, you can contact me at vinci@caltech.edu, and I will walk you through the pathway.
Thank you, Margaret. So of course you could put a question into the Q&A or chat or a comment of something you'd like to share. Oh, Connie, hi Connie.
Hi, Mark.
Connie Lackey with Providence Healthcare, and for many years also a chair of ECA SoCal. What is your comment or thing you'd like to share?
Well, this was a wonderful program today. I enjoyed every minute of it. But in particular, just a moment ago, I think it was you, Mark, that mentioned, or maybe it was Margaret, having people sign up for the Shake Alert app maybe during our exercise. And I haven't done that before. We've always participated in Shakeout, but I haven't stressed signing up for Shake Alert. So I've already put that in my calendar. I'm going to include it in my posters and in the work that we do leading up to it. So thanks for the great idea.
Yeah, we are going to be providing some guidance for it because we've over the last couple of years where we've had the test at drill time, we've gotten comments from people like, oh, we thought everybody was going to get it, and of course they needed to have it installed it on their phone first, or we all had it and only 8 of us got it and 2 of us didn't, or something like that. And so we want to make people aware of what can happen. Often that limitation is not the app, but more like the phone company connection and other issues. And so, and then we're going to have some suggestions for how people might incorporate it in their drill too. So glad you're interested in that. I do think it's something that we want to make people not only know how it works, but plan for it. I think of some organizations that might have, where people will have it on their phone, but it's not in the organization's plan. And so people can start, who get that alert, might start reacting and taking action when the organization as a whole isn't factoring that in, that people might self alert, get the alert there on their own and start to, drop their foot on when other people who haven't are kind of wondering what's going on. So how do you kind of build that in and coordinate and communicate that and make sure people are planning for that? I think of like kids with it on their phones and they start dropping, and then the teacher wondering what's going on, and so there's a lot of discussions that need to happen around this.
I agree, and really good points. I look forward to seeing your guidance. I imagine that other people are experiencing what we are in healthcare, and that is our new employees are considerably younger than I am. And I'm going to say the vast majority of them were not aware of the 94 earthquake. They may have been very young children. So as they are learning to prepare now as adults, they have no frame of reference of what it's like. So to help get their attention and all, I think this might be another good tool in our arsenal. So I look forward to your guidance. Thank you.
Thank you, Connie. Question was in the chat and answered. I just want to make sure people know that this was recorded. It will be on at earthquakecountry.org/SoCal. The link to it also the same page where you registered for today's workshop. The recording will be there along with the slides, a PDF of the slides that were shared. And then Jerry, you put in the Q&A. You want to share about your event this weekend? You can turn your camera on or just by voice.
Yeah, good morning. Can you hear me? I got my
yes, we hear you.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Yeah, I'm the director of our Laguna Beach CERT program, and I cannot tell you what an outstanding webinar this was this morning. I only wish that my entire CERT team and all of our volunteers in Laguna Beach could be watching this. We do a lot of earthquake and other type of emergency preparedness for our volunteers and citizens. And I would really like to share this again with our CERT volunteers. So thank you for the link. And I want to push this out to our volunteers.
Great, Jerry.
Thank you, Jerry.
Hope your event this weekend goes well.
Thank you. Yeah, we do about 5 of these a year. We'll be doing an inside the building search, and then we'll be doing a grid search out on an open field, and then also practicing our handheld radio communications.
Excellent.
So we kind of hit all 3 points there. And then, of course, every year our radio team practices for the Great Shakeout, and we practice an event where all lines of telecommunications, cellular, and so forth are down, and we set up our radio system and transmit an emergency short message test. And then I'm happy to know that we can sync the shake alert with it. So I'm looking forward to adding that to our comm plan this year.
Excellent.
Hey, Mark, I noticed that Christina Miller from Team Rubicon was commenting on the Quake Heroes. I'm wondering if all the people on the call know what Team Rubicon is, their volunteers, and
Oh yeah, great point. Christina, would you like to come on and share briefly about Team Rubicon?
Sure. So Team Rubicon is a veteran-led, volunteer-fueled disaster response organization. We have about 170,000 volunteers across the country, but we have a stronghold of volunteers here in California and a lot in SoCal. So we do everything from mitigation to response and recovery. We'll do, like I also commented, I was really watching those Imperial County earthquakes because I live in San Diego and I'm the Southern California lead planner. So we do mitigation to make sure that everybody has all the things they need before disasters. And then we also partner with, communities that need us based on need, but during and after disasters to get them back and ready again. So we have a ton of skill sets, a lot of active, we have some active duty personnel, we have retired first responders, military, and just really eager civilians that want to get out there and help people. We do use ICS and NIMS, so we're all certified and qualified in those things too. We also do EOC support if needed. So earthquakes are, Kevin Koffler, he's my boss. He and I are, we're earthquake geeks and tsunami geeks. So we're the ones that kind of follow all this stuff. He's out in Japan right now, so I'm monitoring earthquakes in Japan and California for him this week, just to make sure that we stay on top of things. But I saw the Quake Heroes, and I was like, how great would it be to have like a volunteer event that are people that are already like either CERT or Team Rubicon, Red Cross volunteers are already vetted, watch that, just get re-energized and re-educated about it. Like, just how cool would that be? So anyway, it's a little bit about Team Rubicon.
I just messaged you with my email address. I'd love to connect. Been hoping to build a connection with Team Rubicon and ECA and all, and also can talk about how to do a Quake Heroes event. I think we could do something, like you said, pretty big for that group. And the film really shows the importance of being trained in advance so you can help people afterwards, even if you weren't thinking. Especially in a situation where you don't know what to do and someone next to you is injured, and that how frustrating that would be. But if you get trained in advance, the ability to help people and more, and so that's a major emphasis as we show people who weren't trained taking action. They themselves in the film talk about how they later got CERT trained, and they know so much more now in the value of that. So, thank you. We have a question in the Q&A. Oh, that's interesting. To maybe our Caltech partners, when the earthquakes are time-stamped, do you also timestamp or the weather at the sensor? Kind of do you record what the weather was at the sensor?
No, our sensors are buried in the ground, so they don't record the weather. But I don't know. Is Gabrielle still here?
Yeah,
No.
sorry. What was the question?
I think another way of asking is can you need you monitor the weather? Can you and so whenever earthquake happens at a sensor, do you get any data on what the weather was like, and is that a factor?
So weather can affect what we record because especially like wind is really noisy. So if there's bad weather and it'll be really noisy, which means it's harder for us to detect small earthquakes. So in that sense, yes, weather can be important. And we can detect weather with seismometers. And in terms of whether weather can affect the occurrence of earthquakes, probably not. This kind of goes back to that Corey Bloss question where weather is very superficial and most of our earthquakes are, a few kilometers below the surface of the earth. So with rare exceptions, the weather is probably not going to have much effect on earthquake activity as a whole.
Okay, thank you. Margaret and Alan, you want to just lead this part?
Sign off.
2 minutes left.
Yes. Anyway, so thank you all for all of your comments. These are wonderful comments, your feedback in the chat as well. So thank you so much for your participation. It's great seeing everybody. And our next meeting will be on August the 14th. We actually will be doing a on-site, face-to-face networking. It will be at the Chino Police Department, and we're looking to have the theme and the agenda for that date will be the 5th anniversary of the Ridgecrest earthquake. And so we hope to see everybody there. It'll be great to connect again, to put the faces with the names, and be able to actually do a good networking. So hope you all have a great rest of the week. Thank you for participating, and we will see you on August the 14th.
Well, hold on, Margaret. I would just say it's on the screen here. Think about this at least, and maybe share with others something you learned, something you will do, something you'll use, and of course, and tell them things that you learned. And if, as mentioned, the webinar is recorded, so that if you have anybody who would like to watch it, will be available by next week in your groups and partners. Our websites are here, our social media. And again, that link that should pop up when we end the webinar here. Thank you, Margaret. Thank you, Alan, and all our presenters and the team here at SCEC, Gabby, Vanessa, and myself. We really appreciate all the partnership